someone wanted this story to go away. And I am doing the exact opposite of that. So I'm not going to lie. This is terrifying to me. I have no idea what's going to happen when this comes out. Doesn't mean that I'm not going to put it out. Just means that I have no idea what's going to happen when I do.
All right, welcome back, DBS fans, horror fans, actors, writers, anybody who is making a film. We have a special guest today. We are joined by Chris Vander Kaay, and today we're going to talk about a very important subject because I get a ton of emails from filmmakers who ask me, how do I raise $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 for my movie? Let me tell you, the first thing I say is the budget is the only thing you control. Try and make it as small as you possibly can. The $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 doesn't really work anymore. Number one, because if you're looking for a producer that's going to get you on these top tier platforms, they're not going to do it. They're not going to give it to a first-time filmmaker. That money is very, very hard to come by. And number two, if you make a movie, if you get a doctor or a lawyer or someone to give you that money, it's really, really hard for a first-time director to get a product that's going to get that money back. So my advice is always take the resources, take the money that you have and make something. And I think Chris is the best example of that because he made his movie Ask, which opened a ton of doors for him, and he did it for only $250. So we brought him on today to kind of talk about his movie, talk about where indie filmmaking is, and why you really should try and take what you have. If you only have an iPhone, then make a movie with an iPhone because the first one's the hardest. His movie's streaming all over the place. It's on Tubi. It's on all these other platforms. And I would have personally never met Chris if he didn't make this movie. So we're going to kind of dive into it. But first, Chris, thank you for joining us. Please just give us a little bit of background on you before you made this movie, before we connected. How did you start? Where did the love of filmmaking and basically found footage movies come into your life?
Yeah, well, so I guess those are two different things. The love of movies and then found footage are two separate things. The movies I've loved forever. I thought I wanted to be an actor when I was younger, but it turns out that it wasn't acting that I cared about. It was just those were the only people involved in the movie that you see in the movie. So it was the only job I understood. Once I understood what directing and writing was, I was like, oh, I think that's what I want to do, the storytelling aspect. So writing was the primary interest. And I got my start. I always was fooling around writing, but the first thing I ever wrote that got made was I actually sort of started backwards. My first film is still the biggest film I've ever been involved in. I wrote a script for a Western. It became a faith-based Western that was produced for $1 million that premiered on the Hallmark Movie Channel back in 2014. It's called The Redemption of Henry Myers. And it was a very unconventional way that it came about. It was just a guy I knew who had somebody who was a connection. I didn't submit it to anywhere. We just basically sort of crafted it from nothing. And so I got a pretty unrealistic look at how you get into the industry because it started as a fairly big project for a first project, but I got paid almost nothing for it. I think I got $5,000 for the $1 million budget film, and then nothing for 8-9 years, something like that. In the meantime, I went back to school. I got my degree. I was actually teaching screenwriting and English. And then I got poached by a marketing company. I was working with teaching lawyers how to market themselves. And in doing that job and traveling around, I kind of decided I didn't have a ton of disposable income, but I had a little bit of disposable time, and I had a lot of interesting places that I was around. Things that were happening in my life. And so I started thinking, and this sort of goes into what you were talking about, how can I make something that looks more interesting or more complex or more expensive than it actually is? Because I don't have any money to spend. But I always have a phone in my pocket, and I can always shoot footage with that phone. So how do I find a way to make something that can be mine, that I can shoot on my own, that doesn't cost much, but looks like it was much more intentional than it was? And so I started reverse engineering I actually ended up having to get, you can see my front 6 teeth. They're in much nicer shape now than they were 2 years ago. They were in really bad shape, and I had to get all 6 of my front teeth basically shaved down and capped. That was a big deal because it was going to happen over a couple of weeks, and I was just going to have brand new teeth. And I was like, okay, that's an interesting thing that doesn't happen in most people's lives. Is there a way for me to reverse engineer from that and use that as a production element in a story? Because that would be very expensive to do in a movie otherwise. How do you fake bad teeth or fake good teeth? So I knew that was going to be a central piece. And so what I did was I just took anything that was happening in my life. I was traveling to Vegas for an event for with an attorney. I was going to Kentucky to train some other attorneys. And so all of these little pieces of things that were happening in my life, I just piled them all up and I said, okay, how do I use all this stuff and shoot footage at the places or featuring a thing like the change with my teeth and turn it into a story? And that was essentially how the movie was born, was me just reverse engineering, saying, if you don't spend any money, what do you still have at your disposal? And that was basically how the movie came about. So,
I mean, that's basically what I tell people. A lot of our movies as well, you'll basically see if we have in Horror in the Forest, we basically had a location that one of our actors worked on. So we had that location for a discounted price. I look around with the actors that we have that we've worked with before, and I try and basically see which ones will fit that role. We use resources that we've done from other movies or any kind of like donations or anything like that. Whenever I come up with a new concept, the first thing I look at is, all right, how do we take this budget and make it as cheap as possible and basically use what we have? And I think that's the biggest thing with filmmakers. Yes, I would love to have $1 million budget. I'd love to have the house that, that I want, my dream house that has a creepy basement and a scary attic. But we don't really get that. So it's like trying to figure out how we can kind of take what we have and move things around. Because I could change the script. I can't really change my locations or how we're going to kind of do it. So that's really, really cool.
yeah.
How did you come up with... Go
I
ahead.
did just want to say, just to build off of that, something I think is a really important lesson for filmmakers, which is to remember all the things you just described would be fantastic to have. No one is incentivized to give you any of those things if you've never made anything, right? Like, you've not proven that there's any reason for you to possess those things, right? People give you something because they think they're going to get something back from it in the industry. It's an unfortunate reality that you got to deliver. So the point of what I did, the $250 movie, was if I can make something with nothing, it's far more likely that someone will give me something next time. Because if they can see that I can do this with zero, imagine what I can do with 5,000 times that. So
Yeah, and I'll tell you what you just said also is a great point. When I talk to distribution, because one of the big things is they're like, well, no one's going to want to watch a movie that has no budget, right? And that's number one, is a complete myth. Because we made Cold Grave for basically nothing. Chris's movie has done really, really well. It's in all these groups. It's being shared and watched a ton of time. So get that myth that you need to make $1 million for something to watch, for people to watch it. That's just not true at all. Like, you can make something, if you put it out there and you promote it, you will get views for that, whatever you create. But, what he said just makes a lot of sense, is that basically when I talk to distribution, with each movie, we get more and more opportunities. They don't care what the budget is, but they say, hey, if this guy can make this movie for under $50K, what can he do with $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 movies? And those opportunities come. The problem is the market's not there yet, for us at least, but we're getting to that point of, you have to be on Shudder, you have to be on Peacock, you have to be on one of these bigger services to get that money back. But for where we play in the ecosystem that we play in now, those conversations happen, and we can continue to we scale up our movies. The Devil's Hostage, which was one we just shot, we raised our budget by $15,000 because I had high confidence that we can get that money back because we've honed our craft and we've got better. And we have a lot more contacts, available to us right now. So it is scaling. I think the problem a lot of people have is they think that the first movie that they make, they need to sink all their resources and everything into it because it's their baby, it's their project, it's going to make them, blow up. That may have happened in the 90s and 2000s. It doesn't happen now. I think you're in a much better place to kind of use what you have, start off small. And filmmaking, guess what, guys? It's a skill like everything else. We get better each time. It took me really 12 movies to get to the point where I'm like, all right, I understand this. Just our pre-production, our post-production, and just the process of actually filming takes a long time to figure out how to make it. So I think you're much better starting off small. So Chris, my next question to you is, how did you come up with this idea? Because it's something that I really haven't seen before, and that kind of is cool to me because I watch every single indie movie that comes across Tubi or just any kind of platform. I specifically hunt these things out. I've never seen anything really like this.
Well, first of all, thank you. And second of all, it was absolutely intentional on my part to try and do something I hadn't seen out there. I think there's a lot of smart marketers that will tell you that's not necessarily the best idea, because if you do something no one else has done, maybe nobody's looking for it. But the other side of the equation is if you do it well, then you're also standing out, because now you've done a thing no one else, you don't look like anyone else, and therefore you are a unique and interesting thing that is also good. So that was my angle. I was like, I don't have the money, so what I need is the originality. Because anybody with $250 can make a movie theoretically the same way that I did. So there has to be something interesting about this to make it stand out. So my thinking was, well, what's a story you haven't seen 100 times before? What's a story that is unusual? And, you know, it's not that it hasn't been done before. It hasn't really been done in the found footage space. My movie, I think arguably you could find 5 or 6 episodes of The Twilight Zone that are like within throwing distance of my idea. Certainly the story, The Monkey's Paw, touches on similar themes, the idea of be careful what you wish for. But what was interesting to me about the way that I formatted mine was there are a lot of stories in the world about influencers, particularly found footage movies about influencers. What I've noticed that it feels like to me is missing in the space is honesty about what influencers are. In movies, most of the time, influencers are rich, vapid people, and then bad things happen to them. And that's usually the arc of the story. Well, what was interesting to me is the idea that I don't think most people who become influencers get into it with the intent of being that or start as that. I think there's a journey that gets them there. They follow the algorithm, right? They figure out what the people want and then they chase that. And it becomes a thing of where they've adopted whatever they needed to adopt in order to become the thing that people wanted to look at, as opposed to being their authentic self. And I thought, well, that's interesting. There's an element of imposter syndrome to that. The idea that you don't believe that people would be interested in who you really are. And so that idea, the idea of the real you versus the fake you, and how you change yourself once you get in front of a camera when you know it's other people are going to see it, that was compelling to me. And so the idea of dividing a personality, then you start to think, oh, well, then maybe is there another version of you, like a literal other version of you? And then so that's, my brain started going in that space. And as soon as I had that combined with the crazy thing I was talking about with my teeth. One day I had terrible teeth, the next day I had nice ones. I was like, well, that's interesting. What if you just woke up one day and something that was wrong in your life was immediately fixed and you didn't know why? That it changed. It was crazy. And so I started thinking, well, there must be other things in my life that I can use to model that same idea of the bad teeth turns into good teeth overnight. And when I found some that I could use because of the traveling and just weird gifts I'd been given as a marketer, they started stacking up, and I suddenly realized, okay, I can tell this sort of big painted cosmic story or painting on a big canvas without really spending much money, because I've just got all of these things around if I can just figure out how to use them for that purpose. So that's really where the idea came from. It was like half pragmatic and half thematic. Pragmatic meaning like what's the crap I have around that I can use, and thematic meaning what am I saying? Am I saying anything important or interesting or different here? And those were the two things that sort of melded for this idea.
So walk me through, it just seems to me, and you correct me if I'm wrong, it was kind of a work in progress. Was there a script? Did you start with the ending in mind? Because a lot of our movies, we have the ending and we kind of go backwards. Or I'll have like a really, really cool scene and we start to build around like a scene that, you know, that I think is going to be really good in the movie, and we build out that way. Or something like we just did with the mockumentary. It's a work in progress for me. Basically, I'm trying to get the pieces and the ingredients. I always refer to it as like a stew, where I'm putting in all these little pieces and found footage clips, and we have our talking head interviews. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I have everything that I need to edit it down. So, and part of the reason we did this one is everyone's local, or at least in Atlanta, where we could fly them back if I need to add things or, you know, add to the movie. But that one is completely different than we've done with like our cinematic movies, with like Devil's Hostage, where everything was broken down. We had a complete script. We knew what we wanted to shoot, and there's really not much room for pickups because we can't afford them, basically. So how did you get this process? Did you have the ending, or how did this kind of all come together?
Well, so first, to your point about the script, I did not have a script. I had 52 bullet points that basically mapped out every major scene that was in the movie. So even if it was a small scene, if it was a major different location or a different mindset or a shift or whatever, it had a bullet point. And excuse me, basically the way that I worked it was I knew which ones I knew the surgery was coming up, the surgery for my teeth. It was coming up in, I think it was 5 weeks from when I came up with the initial idea. So I was like, everything that has to happen with my bad teeth has to happen in the next 5 weeks. So I had to map out all the bullet points, because I knew what all I had to get shot before that happened. And then the idea was basically I do all of that stuff, then I wait until I've got the surgery done, got the new teeth, then I shoot the rest of the movie. So that was, I would say the impetus was not, I didn't have the ending. I had that one moment that I knew was going to change, the wake up the next day with brand new shiny teeth. That was the thing that I worked both forward and backwards from with the story. The ending, I actually didn't. I had a different ending than what I ended up shooting. It was going to involve me burning a bunch of stuff in a big pit in a yard, and then I realized about 3 days before we shot it, I was like, I'm going over to a friend's house. I maybe don't want to set his yard on fire. Maybe I need to come up with a different angle for that. So the ending was different. The kernel of the theme was still there. So like, the ending still works the way that I wanted it to. I just had a different physical thing happen that I think ended up being better. The traumatic moment at the end is, I think, far more effective than just something burning. But the reason I didn't write the script is because I am 98% of the characters on screen, or 98% of the movie is me on screen. I'm a writer, and I'm not a great actor. I'm okay, but I'm much better writing for myself. I can speak off the cuff when I need to play a character if I understand the emotion of the moment. And I knew it was going to be a problem. Some of these places I was going to shoot on an airplane. I shot a scene in a yard where it was raining, and I knew I wasn't going to get a second take. If I had a script that I had to stick to, there's no way I would get it done, because I would be worrying about, did I get the lines exactly right? Is the motivation correct? So I was like, I just need to understand the emotion of this moment, and then I need to find it in the moment, because that way I'll always know that it's truthful, and I'll always know I got it. So I didn't write the script. I just found the moments as I shot them. And then I guess I would say that I'm able to do that because it's 98% of the film. I didn't have to write it because I didn't have to give that to anybody else. And I don't think I ever shot more than a third take. Most scenes were 1 or 2 takes at most, usually 1. I only shot a third take on a couple of things where I have a scene where I'm actually doing 2 different characters. I'm playing 2 different characters in a scene, and so I had to shoot it a couple of times to make sure I got it right and I could cue myself. But other than that, it was just super fast. I named the character after myself, because that way, no matter where I'm shooting, somebody says my actual name in the scene, doesn't matter, because that's the character I'm playing. So I tried to stack the deck so that it was basically impossible for a scene to quote unquote go wrong. I would still probably be able to use a piece of it somehow. And so yeah, so it was definitely like, it's not exactly what you said in the sense of like, it was coming together in the post-production. It was coming together in the shooting of it. It was literally happening as it happened. Like, there's a sequence where there's a man getting arrested in the parking lot behind me at a Publix in a scene. That was not planned, nor were those people chosen. I was driving around to shoot, and I saw that there were cops in the parking lot at a Publix. So I pulled in really quickly and stopped the car and set up the camera and shot while they were arresting this dude. And that's just happening in the back of the scene now. So the whole movie was flexible in that sense. Like, I really was just trying to grab whatever would make the moment work really well.
So as you're kind of going through this stuff and you're getting this footage, how long did it take you from your first shot to completing this movie? And did you kind of put it down on a timeline and look at it and be like, hey, I need something here, or maybe I want to redo this? Or is that kind of how it came together? Did you just kind of, had a more structured way of doing it as you're kind of like watching it?
Well, so I told you about the bullet point list. What I ended up doing was I created a Google Drive, and I just put a folder for every one of the scenes. And anything that was going to need to be shot for a scene, when I shot it, I just dumped it into that folder. And then if I saw, the folder has the little, you can see there's paper in it. That means something's been put in here. It means you've shot it. So what I would do is I would just sort of map, whenever I was looking at that, which are the empty folders and when do I need to get to them? What's a place that I need to go to shoot this? What are the things I need? And that was kind of the way I operated as I was going throughout the shooting. And I guess it's a result of having sort of like, I think I'm on the spectrum somewhere, and I know I have a little bit of ADHD. So I'm able to sort of hyper-focus on something for short bursts of time. So for about the 3 months that I was shooting, and I say 3 months, but it was huge gaps of time where I wasn't doing anything. I had to wait because I was like, I'm not going to Vegas for 2 weeks, so I can't shoot this stuff in Vegas until I go there. But for the 3 months that I was shooting, from I think I want to say late November to maybe February, it was the window. I would just grab the pieces when I could. I would dump them into the folder. And then I knew when it was time to edit, I knew I had all the pieces because I'd been tracking them. What did end up happening, though, is I did a cut, and it was really long. It was like 102 minutes or something. And I said, this has got to be short. It's a found footage film. So I chopped it down to its barest bones. I got it down to like 72 minutes, but it felt gutted. It felt like it wasn't right. And so I added a little bit back in, but it still only got me about to like 74 minutes or so. And it had like the pauses and the emotional stuff that I wanted back in there. But I was like, it still needs something else. So like a week before I locked picture, I actually shot one of my favorite scenes in the movie, which is the scene where I'm in the jacuzzi. And then when I duck down, there's the guy standing behind me. That was a last minute ad. My friend was like, hey, you should do one of those scenes where like something's behind you. And we basically mapped that out. I shot that with my roommate over an hour a week before locked picture. That was the last thing I put in the film. So it's weird. Like I shot the whole film and then I edited film, cut a bunch of it out, and I was like, you know what? I need another piece. So I just went out and shot it real quick. So that's another thing I would encourage people with, especially when you're working with found footage, is have the flexibility to know. Don't be precious about anything. You can cut stuff out because you can always put it back in it later if you needed it, but cut it out, see what it looks like. Found footage editing is much faster than any other kind of editing, so you can mess around in post-production in really interesting ways. And also, you can shoot found footage stuff faster. So if it is just you making the movie or mostly you can always just go shoot more stuff. And that's what I did. I just shot it again a couple of days before I locked picture. So all of those things were elements that made this very non-traditional in the way that I created it. But I think ultimately it was the most effective way to do a project on this tiny budget, you know?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the movies that are, and I'm just speaking on found footage right now, the ones that do really, really well, or the best found footage movies I've seen, have come from people who do that, who will basically shoot a movie over a year span, and they'll get little pieces, they'll add to it, they'll change it, they'll model it, they'll work it in post. If it needs something, they go and reshoot it. If something's not working, they get rid of it and redo it. And a lot of those are mockumentaries. If you really look at the best found footage movies, or the highest rated ones in the last 3 or 4 years, a lot of them are mockumentaries because you have a lot of flexibility with B-roll. There's just a lot of flexibility in editing. And for the people who only make cinematic, the Addams Family, who makes the low-budget horror movies that go on Shudder, they just have Mother of Flies that just won Styges, or they just won all these awards. That's what they do. They travel around the country. They're extremely talented. The family's actors, and they go and they make their movies. Those people are extremely talented, and they go through and they see what works and what doesn't work. Now, it doesn't always work like that, but for the first time, we were able to do a movie like that with the last one we just did. And like I said, I'm going to put it all on the timeline once it gets there and see what's working and what's not working. I'm going to get Chris, who was in the movie, to come back. And, if we have to beef something up or do something else, we're going to do that with him. And it allows us to just mold it. And when we're doing our cinematic movies and we can't bring people back, the editing is just pain. It's just like, I wish I would have done that better, or we missed an opportunity there, or this just isn't as good as it was in my head, and I can't go back. And I have to basically, either cut it or just kind of edit it. And when you get into editing things like that, it is very painstaking. And I think Chris brought up a good point of don't be precious. A lot of the stuff I have to cut. Most of our movies, the first cut is about 1:45. And for you indie filmmakers, it's about 1:15 is the sweet spot. So I have to cut 30 minutes of my movie. And sometimes there's a lot of stuff in there I just do not want to cut, but I have to. So that's definitely very interesting. And I think it's something that more filmmakers should try and look at, because it does fix a lot of mistakes, but also don't be too precious. I just see a lot of indie movies that are just, especially found footage movies, where they're just walking in the woods for 20 minutes. And you're like, probably this could have been cut down a little bit more, which I think is really cool. So as you're making this movie, you're getting it to, picture lock. Did you get feedback from other people? How did you take that feedback? And did you make any changes to the movie based on that feedback?
Well, that first cut that I was telling you about that was 100 and whatever minutes, I shared that with a couple of friends because I was trying to figure out what to do with it distribution-wise. And I talked to one guy who, he said, I really enjoy it. You got to cut it down to the bare bones, though. You got to take it down to the basically to the studs. And that was that cut that I did, which was too much. And so I think he probably would have been fine with the, whatever it was, the 72-minute cut. I knew that the story I was telling wouldn't work. There are some movies that are, like a lot of found footage films are roller coasters. And so they work better when they're fast and they're moving constantly. And then they end when they end, like a Child's Play movie. You shoot Chucky in the head and then credits start rolling. There's no like denouement. But my movie, I knew it was differently paced and it was a different kind of thing. So I needed to put some of that padding back in. But so there was that first cut, then I added some stuff back in. And then from there, most of the rest of the process involved me just figuring out what the hell I was going to do with the movie more than like looking for feedback on how to change it. Because I'll be honest, I only spent $250 on it. This is the only movie in my life that I'm never going to have to do anything for someone else for. I'm not going to have to appease a producer. I'm not going to have to hope that I can get money back for somebody else. So I'm just going to put the movie that I want to make out, you know, the one that's the closest to what I wanted to make. I'm never going to get that chance again because I'll probably be working with somebody else's money. So my goal was more, I need to figure out what the hell to do with this movie. You know, like, am I just going to put it out on YouTube or what am I going to do? Luckily, I met Mary Beth McAndrews, who is the editor-in-chief over at Dread Central. I met her about a decade ago, and when we were both just sort of struggling writers. Well, now she's running Dread Central, and she's a huge found footage fan, and she has a lot of connections with the industry. And so she said, I asked her, you know, just would you be interested in helping me? And she came on as a producer and helped me find a home for it, which is where we ended up with at POV Horror. And she connected me with a lot of people in the community. I met a lot of the people for the Unnamed Footage Festival through that, and some other filmmakers. And also she was just helpful in sort of getting the word out when the movie was released in the weird way that it was released a little bit at a time, because I didn't realize you could have it on one platform, but just because it got approved to go to one place doesn't mean it's actually going to premiere there at any reasonable amount of time. So, you know, it comes out on POV and then it's not on Tubi for the next 6 months. So you got to like roll it out a whole different time when it comes out there. So it was a sort of a sloppy release in that respect for my first film, but it was hugely helpful to have somebody who loved found footage, understood the industry a bit, and had some connections. And so I was really lucky that I made friends and connections with people who understood this a lot more than me, because in all likelihood that's all I would have done with it. I would have just like put it out on YouTube and like posted online, hey, everybody go check this out when you have a second. And so she was really the person that helped me. I mean, this movie has done much better than any $250 movie should have done. It's played theatrically in Texas. It is probably going to be playing again here in Tulsa in October with a double feature with another found footage movie. Like, I never imagined a movie that I made for less than $300 was going to get released, let alone play on the big screen anywhere. So so much of this has just been luck, timing, people that you know, and, you know, hitting on an idea that seems to like touch a nerve with people. So
yeah, and I mean, you never would have got any of this without starting. And this is one thing that I really want to highlight too, is nobody ever focuses on distribution. Distribution is the craziest thing that I've ever had to do for anything, just because of how wild it is. Not only are you working with distribution to find a home, you're working with different streamers. You have to understand how all these algorithms work. You have to have release strategies. You have to know when to market. It is an absolute masterclass in business that you have to do within a span of 90 days, basically. And I come from a business background. I come from a marketing background. And it took me a long time to figure out how to like work these systems, because with each movie we got better though. So we struggled with the first one. I didn't sign a very good deal, but the movie still did really well, and I learned from it, and we get better with each one. You get more contacts, and now we're at the place where I don't even have the movies yet, because usually you get a movie and you have to either go to film festivals, and that's when distribution sees you. That model, again, I consider that the old model. It doesn't really work as well. The new model is you send distribution streamers your streaming link to view them. Because guess what? Distributors want content. They want stuff. If the movie's good, they will pick it up. So that's what you have to do now. And then basically when it gets to the point, you have to sign a contract, and then you get a release window to basically push your film. Now, with each of that, the steps get a little bit more difficult. As far as if it's your first one, you're navigating a lot of information. You need an entertainment lawyer. The deliverables are very, very difficult. It's hard to get this stuff done. But now we're at the place where I can just send a screener, or I'm even sending scripts to distribution saying, hey, is there a place for this home? If I make this movie, will you guys take it? So I don't have that pressure of, if I spend all my money and give it to distribution, like, hey, this isn't the film for us, and I'm like, oh shit, like, how am I going to get my money back? If they don't like the script, then they're probably not going to like the movie, and I just give it to somebody else. We've gone from my original list of about 15 distribution companies that I would send screeners out to I think we have about 86 now that are actually good, that are going to pay you and get your money back. But that's a process. That was the process of 12 movies, basically getting to that point. starting like with Chris, with something that he started out on, he got all these connections. Now, Chris, if you make another movie, do you know how this process works a little bit better? Is it a little bit easier next time?
For sure. I mean, I got lucky that my first film is profitable, but that's because how could a $250 movie not be profitable if anybody watches it? But yeah, absolutely. I had the same situation you did with the first film. Like the contract that I signed and where the movie ended up being was not the ideal situation for me. But I was in the position where I had a movie and I just wanted the world to see it. And a lot of times, people who have their first movie, they make a bad decision for that exact reason, which is like, I wanted to get it out in the world and this person said they would put it out there. So I'm just going to say yes to whatever they offer me. And then you end up realizing there was a lot of things you could have pushed back on, or you could have changed, or you could have asked for that you didn't. And the next time you'll learn a better lesson. Or, like you said, you'll have a list of 10 people to go to instead of 5. Or you'll have a contact at this place that you didn't have before because they put a movie out there. And then suddenly you have more venues so you don't feel that pressure, that desperation to go with the first person that says yes. You've got some other options. So a lot of it is more just like the pragmatic knowledge of like knowing you're not as desperate as you were the first time around. Some of it is knowledge, and then some of it is also just like being able to take a step back and take a breath and be like, is this the best decision or is this just the fastest decision,
Yeah, and I think that that's a valid point. Nothing hurts my soul more than I see filmmakers who make their movie for $250,000 and then sign a bad deal. Because if you sign a deal, and how they really get you is they'll have expense fees. And usually there's a very well-known horror distribution company that charges $50,000 for expense fees. And they will take a good amount of movies. They do very, very good job at promoting, and they're very, very prestigious. But right off the bat, you're 50 grand in the hole because you have to pay those expense fees before anything else. And for us, if you're not on those bigger platforms, the Shudder, the Peacock, the bigger ones, 50K is kind of like where we top out. Now, Last Cabin has blown that away, and it's absolutely fantastic, but I don't know if I could recreate that. This could just be a once-in-a-lifetime thing. We could have just struck gold with something. We'll find out when we release another movie in 2 months. But for the most part, if you're 50 grand in the hole right off the bat and you don't have those bigger platforms, you're in a world of hurt, and it sucks. And I just see it all the time because making a movie is so difficult. It takes so many years of your life, and they just want to get it out in the world. They just sign the papers. Here it is. Just get it out there. That they don't pay attention to the details, and distribution companies know that. A lot of sales agents know that. They will tell you, they will blow smoke up your ass, basically, and say, hey, this is the best movie I've ever seen. It's going to make $1 million. Just sign the contract. We'll make it happen. And then 3 months later, like, hey, we got to go with another distribution company. It just didn't hit all the check boxes. Here's a shitty deal that you could have got by just sending a screener. So really, really pay attention. If you have to get yourself an entertainment lawyer to look over this stuff, please do it, because this is where your money's going to come. It's going to come for your next film. But also, it comes back to what Chris said with not being precious. I'm not super precious about our movies because I'm worried once we get this one out there, I have 3 other movies in post-production, and I'm already working on the next one. I want the best deal possible, but I've gone with distribution companies that, maybe appeal to a smaller demographic or might do a little bit more with it. I've signed deals that are a little bit less than I usually do just to get maybe a bigger reach, or they'll do something special. And that's kind of important too, because I see a lot of movies, and Chris, you can kind of probably highlight this. There's a ton of found footage movies where I always see, I'm like, man, I really want to see these movies. They're stuck in purgatory for 3 or 4 years. I think Malibu Horror Story is like one where it's like, I really want to see this movie, but it doesn't get distribution. I don't know why, because I've heard really good things about the movie, but it could be they're just looking for the deal that's just not there. But there's a lot of movies like that. And, you want to get that movie out there. You want to get it feedback on it so you can get better. But if you're waiting for this crazy deal that's not going to come, it's going to be tough. So,
and that's one of the reasons why, going back to what you said, make it as cheaply as you can. Because if you've spent a bunch of money, then you probably are sitting on the bench waiting for the better deal while your movie gathers dust. Like, it's not great that I didn't get the best deal for my first film, but it was a $250 film, so I was profitable within weeks of it ending up on the first platform, So I had the luxury of being able to do that. But at the same time, I also If I'd spent $7,000 on the movie and it had something of similar quality, I'd have been a lot more picky, would have taken a lot longer, maybe not gotten better distribution because I'm a first time filmmaker. It maybe wasn't good enough to to get the kind of deal I would have wanted, but I would have felt like I had to do it in order to get that money back. And so that's another way that your budget can hamstring you if you're not careful when you're not planning ahead with how much you're spending.
I think that's a really good point. So let's talk about technical stuff. As far as, you shot this whole movie on your iPhone, what did you use for audio?
So I have to tell my friend, the only other person that appears in the movie for the most part, which is the guy at the beginning and the end, the police forensics tech. That's my friend Steven. He was helped with the editing and did a lot of the sound design. He will tell you, I really wish Chris had some friggin' microphones, because you'll see in almost every scene I'm wearing earbuds. And the reason for that is because I was using the microphone literally on the earbuds that was plugged into the phone. That was how I did the audio. I had two pairs. One was like actual iPhone earbuds, and then the other one was like the ones that like you wear when you jog that have the thing that go over your ear so they don't fall off because you're sweating. So I had the two pairs. The ones with the over ear thing, the audio was terrible. Almost all of the work that Steven did on audio was just trying to clean up the terrible audio from that one set of headphones. So obviously, this is a good cautionary tale. Don't do that. I dove in the deep end and I was like, I'm just going to make a thing and everybody can hear me when I talk to them on the phone with this, so it must be a good microphone. Don't do that. You can buy, if nothing else, you can buy little clip-on mics for $25 that you can plug something into your phone, and then at least you can get your phone further away from you than this. I couldn't go any further than the cord, so that gives you an idea of how I was shooting most of this movie. But that's what I did for sound. It was literally my iPhone and headphones with the mic on it. That was all of the technology that I used for this. I didn't light any scene. Everything was natural lighting, except for one moment, because there's a scene where there's a character in silhouette, and so he was wearing a hoodie, and so we had to have lights, but they were just like house lights. They were just specially placed. But no actual lighting, no sound equipment other than the microphones, and I didn't shoot anything except for the iPhone, except in one scene I recorded on the webcam on my desktop and then used that as well. But that's it. That was everything that I used for the film.
But I would say sound's always the biggest issue with us, or at least with stuff that I see with indie filmmakers. If your sound is not good, I'm going to turn your movie off. I mean, I'll watch it because I watch everything, but for the most part, that's the biggest thing. Get yourself a lav mic. Like Chris said, there's cheap ones with iPhone stuff. We have the Sennheiser ones. They're very expensive, but they are absolute tanks. I've had them for about 10 years now. And I highly recommend them because they're absolutely fantastic. They clip right onto your actors. If you have a good mic operator,
when I was shooting with you, I was mind blown when they were going to come mic me, and then he taped the microphone on my shirt underneath the jacket. I was like, "There's no way in hell, man." And then the quality of the mic is so good. When I heard the audio, the clip that you sent me, I was like, "How is it that good, man? If I had my microphone more than 3 inches away from my face, you couldn't hear me at all." So I was so used to using garbage equipment that I was adjusting my performance and my behavior to just match the technology. Whereas in your case, you got technology good enough that you don't have to worry about it anymore. And that's really one of the smart moves to take one of the heavy lifts off of you as a creator.
I definitely say the audio is good. You want to make sure you have good audio. Everyone's so focused on picture and lighting and stuff. My philosophy on lighting is less is more. We don't do a ton of lighting stuff in there. What about did you have a little bit of visual effects in your movie? How did you kind of pull that off, and how'd you do that?
Yeah, well, so the final sequence, I told you I was going to burn something in a pit, and then I was trying to figure out how to do a scene where my head exploded or popped or blood came out of it. I was thinking this, I wanted to do a big effect. But then, 3 days before I was shooting, I was like, there's no way I can do this. It's not feasible that I could do it. However, there's tons of tutorials online that show you how to do certain kinds of things digitally, in post-production. So I talked to my friend Steven, who was going to help me, and I have to give him full credit. I did not do the visual effects sequence at the end. He did. And so I was watching some tutorials, and I was like, hey, look at this thing where they make somebody vanish, sort of like a mutant power type thing. I was like, if we tweak this a little bit, we can use this of a person just sort of slowly dissipating. Can you do that? And he was like, yeah, I think we can do that. And I said, so basically what we do is if we have a static shot and I'm in the shot and then I get up and just leave the shot, then you can merge me being there and then the shot with me not there, cut out the part of me leaving, and then just do that transition using this effect, right? And he was like, yeah, I think we can handle that. So that was all it was. It was literally the easiest physical production part. Is just me in a shot, and then at a certain point in the moment, I stop doing something, and then I sit for about 4 seconds so he has some dissolve time, and then I just run out of the shot, and we just leave it running for another 15 seconds. That was easy for me because I knew that was going to be somebody else's problem in post-production. But that was how we did it. But the challenge of that final sequence actually was, I get critiques to this day about people saying, that final sequence looks pretty good, but the rain effect that you use looks fake. Like, it doesn't look like real rain. And it always pisses me off because I'm like, complain about the disappearing if you want, but that's real fucking rain. Pardon my French. When I came to that scene, we'd been shooting all day and it was raining, and I was like, oh God, we've got that one outside sequence. Let's shoot everything else and wait for it to stop raining. Never stopped raining. So I had one take. That final sequence with the wrench, with the tweezers and all that, or the pliers. I mean, all of that was done in a single take because I didn't have a change of clothes. I was going to get rained on when I went outside. I was going to be soaking wet. And so I knew we couldn't do a second take. So when I was talking to Steve, and I was like, we got to get all this in one, man. So the most important scene of the film, I have a huge monologue. It wraps out the entire story. And I know I got one friggin' take and I'm getting rain poured on me at the same time. So the effect was not the hard part. It was the like, can you get this performance? Because if you can't, you have effed your movie, basically, So yeah, ironically, the special effect was the least difficult part of that final sequence.
Yeah, and I would say there's a lot of tutorials out there. We do a lot of shapeshifter movies, and I've gotten really good at like having one character, or you can basically clone the screen, cut it down halfway, and have the actor stand here, and then take another scene where he's right here, and you have two of them on the same screen. That one works really well. Really, there's a ton of tutorials on YouTube. I mean, that's like the biggest thing. And if you can't get it done, we use Upwork, we use Fiverr for basic special effects stuff, muzzle flashes, or if like we need to add a little more blood to like a special effect, we can kind of do that. I found some really talented graphic designers or not graphic designers, but SFX artists, VFX artists on Upwork that we use a lot now. And they're there, man. And they're not as crazy expensive as long as it's small little stuff. It's not the craziest thing to use them. And they can really kind of give you that extra production budget. Because really my whole goal is to we usually shoot our movies for $15,000 to $25,000. It's how do I make that $15,000, $25,000 look like $1 million? Right. That is the goal of my whole production. Yeah. Because most people do not watch a movie for under $1 million. They've probably seen 5 or 6. One of them is probably Blair Witch. One of them is probably Paranormal Activity. Nobody is really exposed to this kind of movie, so immediately they can already tell like something's a little bit off of this movie. But my goal is to just try and increase that production budget because distribution is looking for that. The streamers are looking for that. And one way is with special effects. And I'm not very good at it, but I can watch a YouTube tutorial, and I've done that before. We've done a lot of green screen work in the movie we're about to release. I did most of that stuff. It was a huge pain in the ass, but I got it done, and now I know how to do it if we have to do it again. Once again, coming back to the second time's going to be easier. So, Chris, what's your editing experience basically to put this together? Because one thing that I get from a lot of people is, well, I have to hire a post-production house to do this. I can't edit my own movie because I don't know how to edit.
Yeah, well, so I told you I had somebody who helped me with the editing, and by helping me, I mostly mean he did that sequence at the very end, the special effects sequence. Everything else in the movie I edited myself. And actually, that's not the only thing I edited. I did that, and then we haven't talked about it yet, but I did a 5-episode TV series called Found Footage Finds, which is a documentary series about found footage, and I shot that entirely myself, shot it, edited it, and in fact, to your point, used some green screen in that one that I had not had experience in before. So also a learning curve there. But I edited on Adobe Premiere. It's not a hugely expensive investment to use a program like that because it's a monthly fee. You can pay for it for a year, but you may not even need it for a year, depending on how long it takes you to edit. The thing with found footage is you don't have to know all that much to edit on the level that I was editing. Like if you were making a Scorsese film, you need to know more sophisticated things than I needed to know. I didn't even, for most of the movie, use much in the way of color correction. I didn't even realize that was a thing, that you would do until I got to later projects. But that didn't matter for the type of first film that I was making, because that film was supposed to look cheap. It was supposed to look like a guy that was shooting stuff in real time and sending it to his editor. So you were seeing raw, uncut footage. But I think it's important for your first project, maybe for further projects, because I did it for several, to work on it yourself if you can. Because if you don't understand what goes into it, you're not going to know whether or not you've got somebody else who's doing a good job for you, who's doing it at the right speed and the right price and all that, because you won't understand any of those things. You won't even understand simple things like knowing that you can remove a chunk in found footage. You can just remove a chunk from the middle of a scene with a hard cut, and nobody gives a shit. Because it's found footage. You know what? The footage got lost. We cut it out because it's boring. Who cares? Nobody really clocks that kind of stuff anymore, especially because of YouTube. The way that people use the quick cut edit to cut out pauses in between people speaking, it's invisible now. Like, we don't even see it. So you can get away with you can hide a lot of sins in found footage film with editing as you're learning. And I did. I mean, I edited a few little things here and there, but nothing to the degree of this. But I was also like, I don't have the money to pay somebody else. So it's either I learn how to do this or this movie doesn't come out, I think it was Robert Rodriguez in the book Rebel Without a Crew, where he was offered to get paid by the studio to do a separate cut of the film. Like, they were going to pay for a room for him, and then they were going to pay for an editor. He asked them, if I edit it, can I keep the money you were going to pay for an editor? And they said yes. And he was so cheap that not only did he do that, but he said, can you just pay me directly and I'll get my own hotel room? So they gave him the money, and then he didn't even get a hotel room. He just stayed in the editing room, and he saved that money too. And I feel like you don't have to go that far, but you should be thinking in terms of, like, if I can't do it, it might not get done, so I got to figure out how I can do it, at least for your early projects,
Yeah. And I mean, the most important thing for you as a filmmaker is to basically edit your own movies. I will say this all the time. Editing is the most important part of the movie process. It's similar ways where people kind of don't really worry about distribution. They don't worry about editing. And I think that is a cardinal sin. You're going to save yourself so much headaches if you learn how to do it yourself. It looks Premiere, which is what I use as well, looks daunting. It looks crazy. There's all these buttons and stuff. It really comes down to the little razor tool and just adjusting things. Yep. And if you can get it there and you can understand pacing, your writing's going to get better. Your directing's going to get better. If you're shooting the movies, that's going to get better. I've gotten to the point now, because I edit all my movies. We have an editor that basically does the first round of polish, and he's getting very, very good because he knows my style now. But he didn't know that in the beginning because I didn't know my own style. Now I can shoot the movie where there's less editing involved, where I could work with somebody else to help me get these things done faster, and we can get them out, into the world quicker. There's a reason why movies, especially indie movies, take 3 or 4 years to basically get done and released, because editing is very, very hard. The director's probably, like, when I first started out with our first 8 movies, I had somebody else editing. I didn't know how to edit. And it was a pain. It was just chaos, and it took forever, and it wasn't very good. And I kept having to go back with notes and notes and notes and notes. And then I was to the point where I was like, I can't keep paying for this, and it's not sustainable, and it's just not good. And I'm still making the same mistakes, because when you're in editing, really all editing is just looking at your mistakes and being like, oh my God, I'm never going to do that again, or I messed up here. So when I get to a shot like that where it was too dark or it wasn't lit properly, I know now to give it a little bit more attention. But once I started editing my movies, they got exponentially better. And it's to the point now where there's not a lot of editing that needs to be done, because I'm taking care of all the problems, as I'm shooting them. And if you're not editing your own movies, you have to start. It's going to be really expensive. Editing is very expensive. It's very time consuming. We put hundreds and hundreds of hours on each movie, even just the found footage movies, to put all that stuff together. If you're not doing it yourself, it's going to be tough. So really, there is so many tutorials out there. There's so much stuff out there that you can learn from. YouTube is such a resource. And going back to what Chris said, if your only resource is time, this is where you kind of do it. And then each one's going to get easier and easier and easier. So you got to learn how to edit.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's
Yeah, and
just
remember, you can't.
that's the one I give all to everybody. And even the big cinematic movies, best editors can really save a movie. You can really make a really good movie. And I think a lot of movies that I see a really good indie movie, and I'm like, man, if I just could edit that and knock 25 minutes off or change it up a little bit here, you could have had something really great. And it's a skill like everything else.
Yeah. Well, and to your point a minute ago, you said that you were working with other editors and you kept having to send notes and stuff like that. Sometimes you don't know what you need to correct because you haven't done it yourself. Until you do it, then it's suddenly going to become a thing where not only do I not have to tell anybody else anymore because I'm the one doing it, but I now understand what the problem is because I'm in the middle of it. I'm chopping the pieces and I can see why it's not fitting together. If you weren't in the room, you don't have that experiential element of it, you know? My first cut of the movie, my film, obviously it's nowhere near as complex as most people's movies, but my first cut of the film, it took me a week and a half and it was done. I had my first edit. Now, obviously that wasn't a locked picture because I did that second cut that cut everything down, added stuff back in. But that first cut of the movie, there's no music. There were very limited sound effects. And aside from the visual effects sequence at the end, which was edited by somebody else and obviously would have taken me a while, there wasn't a ton to do. And like I said, the ADHD allows me to sort of hyper focus. So I knocked out a cut in a week and a half. And the amount that I learned about filmmaking, just having to do all that crap myself, was worth its weight in gold.
And I think editing is going to make you a better writer. It's going to make you a better director. It's going to just make everything better. And it's really, you have to learn how to edit. If there's like one thing you're going to take from this lesson tonight, is just really learn how to edit. You'll get so much better with everything, because now, even with the movies that I'm doing now, when I'm writing a screenplay and I'm like, I don't know which way is going to be the best way to do this, we'll do 2 different variations and then I'll just leave it up to editing. And it's something, when I worked with you, Chris, I was like, don't cut things out of like the script or anything like that. We want to expand on it. If you even added scenes, the clip that's going to be in the beginning of this movie or the beginning of this podcast to show you guys is improvised by Chris. He came up with it on his own. Adding more and then allowing me to sit down and edit it and look at it through my big screen that I have right here. And I always tell the actors, don't cut things. If anything, give me more. Let me make a decision when I'm in the editing room. Because also, I have this tiny little screen, this little monitor, and I've done 20 movies. I still don't know which is going to be the best take until I sit down and have it. And it's like sometimes there's ones where on set, I'm like, that's not going to be really good. And it turns out to be the best take. So it's like, leave it all there. I could fix it in editing. I could fix it in post. We don't say fix it in post. I could at least look at it in post. But that would never happen if I wasn't the editor, because you never know if someone you're handing off to is just going to use a random take and you'll never get the best one in there.
Yeah. Well, I always say, the process of editing can only take away. So if you don't provide more, then there's less to take away. You know, like you don't have options in the end to take away from. You know, if I only did one take of a scene, now this is bad for me to say it because I did only do one take of many scenes, but that was of necessity. But I mean, my preference would be, if I'm shooting and I have the time and the space, you know, if there's multiple angles you could try them, because the worst that happens is you don't use them. But what about when you can't use them because you didn't get them? You know, that's worse.
And I have movies, we're working on one right now where I didn't get enough footage, and it's really hard to fix that. Where Devil's Hostage, I think the first cut of that movie is 2 hours long, and I have to get it down to 1 hour 15. Beautiful. Fantastic. That is the fantastic problem to have. We have another movie that is 1 hour long, and I have to get it to 1 hour 15. Going to be a huge mess to do that. It's going to be very, very hard.
A lot of Zack Snyder slow-mo in that one.
I mean, I don't even know. We're waiting to see. I got to let the brain cook a little bit more on that one, but it's not going to be fun. I'll tell you that right now. So let's talk a little bit. You got to ask out there. Let's talk about the feedback, because to me, this is the coolest part of this whole process. Not only are people watching your movie, they're giving you feedback on your movie. They're giving you, whether it's good or bad. In our case, we get a lot of bad feedback, but it's still feedback. To me, people are like, oh, do you like read the reviews? I read every single review. I reply to every single person that reads my thing. You go on our Letterboxd, you go on our TikTok, Instagram. I'm active in the Facebook groups. I am so happy that someone just watches the movie and is moved enough to either just type on their keyboard. You can say it's the worst thing ever. You can say critical feedback, whatever. It's just really, really cool for me to have somebody that does that. And if you go look on our YouTube, or not our YouTube, but just YouTube in general, there's people who break down our movies in 60-minute clips. Somebody made a 60-minute YouTube video on our movie. That is absolutely insane to me, and it's absolutely precious. But we are a fan-first company. I listen to everybody's feedback because it helps us get better. And it comes back to making these movies for cheap, getting that feedback, and doing a better job the next time. There are specific things that people do not like that we are actively correcting. There are people that you will never make happy no matter what. And there's people who just don't like things under $1 million. They're just used to that stuff. But the feedback is so important in growth as a filmmaker to get these movies done, learn from them, see what people like, what they don't like, get rid of the stuff they didn't like, and then apply the stuff that they like to the next movie. That's how you get better. Talk to me a little bit about the reception of Ask. Did you get any feedback that you're like, oh, okay, this is a really good point, I could do this better next time? And how did you any tips on getting feedback? Because this is one thing if you are a reviewer, this is multiple people working a year, maybe 2 years to get this done. The least you can do is provide good feedback and help them improve.
Right, for sure. Well, I think I've been pretty lucky in the sense that I have not had, I would say in the entirety of the time that I've interacted with people about the movie, I've had 3 people that I have seen that have given a negative review of the film. I'm sure there are more. I've just not run into them. But I mean, a lot of, I'm on the Reddit page for the found footage Reddit site. I'm in a lot of found footage Facebook groups. I'm on a Discord server. So there are there's a lot of people that are interacting with me, reaching out to me specifically to, ask me about the movie or post on the trailer and stuff. Almost all of it has been really positive. And that's great. It's rare, I think, for especially found footage films to have that level of positivity. I think it's due to 2 things. The first is that I think I have led with this movie cost almost nothing to make, and I did it out of passion. I never tried to hide that this was an inexpensive movie. In fact, part of the marketing was that this movie was inexpensive and that it's supposed to look the way that it looks, that it's supposed to look rough and unpolished. And I think people have met the movie halfway. So that is part of one of the reasons why I think people have given it the credit. And the other is what it's about, which is about imposter syndrome and feeling like you maybe haven't made an impact on the world and wondering whether or not your voice gets lost in the crowd of everybody else. Those are things that I think a lot of people, especially ones that watch this kind of movie, can relate to. So I've been lucky that it's connecting with a lot of people. And I will also say that I don't know if it's everybody's experience in the found footage space, but found footage fans have been great for me in terms of being able to organically grow an audience. I have spent $0 on marketing for this film, with the exception of when it screened in Houston. I wanted to, run an ad to make sure that some people showed up for it when it was screening. But I've spent no money because found footage fans, they're very loyal. They're very interested in finding the new movie or the obscure movie, right? They want to find a thing that they haven't heard about from anybody else, or that's had this reputation and is very difficult to find or whatever. They love taking that journey. They love looking for the thing and discovering the thing. So all you have to do is sort of meet them halfway with, I've got an interesting thing you've never heard of before. It's a found footage movie about an influencer that's a cosmic horror, and you've never seen that, it's the monkey's paw for the YouTube generation. That's a pretty quick, simple hook. And I do, like you said, everybody that comments or everybody that interacts, I thank them for watching the movie, because ultimately, whether they liked it or they didn't, they donated their time to the movie. They spent 86 minutes, however long the movie is, watching the movie. We live in a society now where the premium that most of us pay is with our time. So much stuff is quote unquote free. They can watch it with commercials on YouTube, or they can watch it on Tubi with ads. The real estate that you're making is off of their attention. So them giving you their attention, for me, deserves a thank you. And so I thank them. Even the people that didn't like it, I thank them. I say, listen, I appreciate you giving it a chance. I knew it wasn't going to be for everybody, and I'm sorry that it wasn't for you, but thank you for watching it. It means a lot to me, and thank you for supporting independent filmmakers. I know you're not going to stop watching independent filmmakers because you didn't like my movie, and that's what I appreciate. Thank you for doing it. The only place where I would say you and I diverge a little bit in the sense of the projects, as far as the feedback goes, I have had a little bit of negative feedback, but almost all of it has been sort of, I don't want to say baseless, but without shape. The people that didn't like it don't really have any information for me to be able to build off of. So that is I would say frustrating, but it's like, I get it. My stuff's not going to be for everybody. That's fine. What I would say, though, is that the advantage I have of making the world's, most dirt cheap film ever to play in a theater is that I don't have to change anything because it's going to make its money back, and it's the thing I wanted to do. Like, found footage is like punk rock or community theater in the sense that it's the cheapest way to do the thing that you love, that it's possible to do it, right? It can become a career for some people. It's a career for you. It is not a career for me currently. I would like it to be. But I also, at the same time, I know that, like many punk rockers, they did not get into it because they thought it would become a career. They got into it because they had something to say, and they wanted the least number of boundaries between them and the final art that they wanted to create. And for me, that's kind of what this is, which is like, if I don't spend a ton of money, nobody gets to tell me no. So I don't actually have to listen to your notes. Now, the audience is obviously the final arbiter, and if they don't like it, it means, yeah, probably I shouldn't make that movie again. I won't make a sequel to it, certainly. But for me, the notes are less about, like, if somebody said, dude, your sound is fucking terrible, fix it, I would listen to that note, obviously, because that's a thing that technically is preventing someone from enjoying my movie. But when I sometimes get notes where, like, this was too slow, and I'm like, well, somebody else said that it was like the ideal slow burn for them. So those are notes that cancel each other out. I can't decide that one is right and one is wrong, which means I have to go with my instinct on that one. So I think there's a way to navigate the way that people interact with your material, and even notes that seem like they're reasonable notes, or notes that do come from a place of, here's the concern I had with it, doesn't necessarily make them right or wrong. The thing about art, and maybe not everything in the field is art, but I try to make what I consider art, is that, like, not everybody's going to jive with it. Like, not everybody's going to connect with it. It doesn't mean that you're wrong, and it doesn't mean that you need to change the thing. Like, Alfred Hitchcock had a movie that was a failure. He didn't stop making movies about a guy who was wrongly accused of a crime. Like, he was going to do that regardless. It was always going to happen, He could change other things, but there are certain things about your movies you're always going to want to do. That's why you want to make them. That's the stories you want to tell. So for me, it's always a delicate balance between, is the note something that will help make it more understandable, navigable, or palatable to an audience, versus, am I just catering to someone's specific tastes and robbing someone else of the genuine experience that they could have had because I wanted to make it easier for someone else? So that's the only place where I wouldn't even say disagree, but for me, it would take a lot more from a note than what I have gotten so far to make me feel like that I should consider changing anything other than, like I said, technical issues, or, like, sometimes people say something about the pacing, which with my film I understand because it was shot on the fly, and but yeah, I mean, my experience has been almost wholly positive, and I know that's a rarity for anybody in the film arena, period, nowadays, to have a mostly positive interaction. But I think part of it is also the way that I come at the audience. I'm very open to interacting with people. When people ask me questions, I answer the questions. I'm always thankful and appreciative, and I don't think everybody always is. They're certainly not approachable. Like, found footage is different than other arenas, you know what I mean? Like, you have to make yourself not necessarily accessible, but, like, approachable even in the digital sense, Like, if someone wants to see your movie, is it in a bunch of places, or do you only have it on one platform? Is it only able to be rented for $5.99, or can it be streamed free somewhere? Like, what have you done to make it less of a threshold for them to adopt it, So try to do that and try to be open and available and positive to people. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I love the found footage community. One of the reasons why we do found footage movies is because the community is so great. They are just absolutely wonderful people. They will go and watch everything, and they'll give everything a chance, which is fantastic. And a lot of the indie stuff comes from them, and it's great. But what you said about just basically being accessible, that's part of our business model. And it works for found footage, but it also works for anything else. Hollywood is kind of behind this gate. And for us to go and be like, hey, we made this movie, what are your thoughts, good or bad? I'm just trying to improve. People love that stuff. They love it because you're interacting. I reply to all their stuff. We did a Reddit AMA on our last one that just shot the movie up to the top 1,000 IMDb because you were just asking a ton of questions. I'm like, we're an indie film company. What do you have? What questions do you have about this movie or just us in general? And there was a ton of comments, and we interacted with all of them. We had a great conversation, a great dialogue with them. And a lot of people just don't have never experienced that outside of the celebrity AMAs, and those are kind of like, you see them, there's good ones and bad ones, but we're coming at this as a place, if we want to interact with our fans, if I can get just one extra fan, if I can get one follow on TikTok and Instagram, one of these things, just build, someone else that just likes our stuff. That's all I want to do. Because for me, it's really, really cool just for people watching our movies. And like Chris brought up a really good point, you're never going to please everybody. There's going to be people who like fast movies. There's going to be people who like slow movies. There's going to be people who like a lot of gore, who don't like a lot of gore. And I'll give you this little tidbit, and this is why I always tell indie filmmakers, don't read the reviews and see if there's stuff in there that you can use to make your movies better. But our lowest rated movies are our highest grossing. There is a correlation with the lower the IMDb and Letterboxd score and the more money that we make. Makes no sense at all. But there it is. Because they're like, well, you can go buy IMDb ratings and reviews. And I don't even waste my time with that. It's the more divisive movies. Go look at Skinamarink and Outwaters. Huge divisive movies. They made a lot of money. So just keep that in mind that you're not going to please everybody. But I think Chris brought up a good thing. If there's technical stuff in there that you can kind of glean at, then take a look at that stuff. If people are saying your audio is not good, we get a lot of feedback because I talked about the lav mics earlier. Lav mics are really good at dialogue. They're not really good at sound effects and outside ambience, and we don't have the budget for a boom operator. So I have to either go and use Foley myself or kind of create that stuff. I'm not a sound designer. It's very, very hard. I'm working very hard to improve it, but that's just something that people bring up a lot, that our movies, quote unquote, feel hollow, and there's not like a lot of heaviness to them. And once again, like what Chris said, trying to figure out what people mean when they say things is a little bit difficult. But if you push them, they're like, oh, you just don't have like the door opening, or I can't hear your footsteps, or I can't hear like ambient noise. And then you start to realize, wow, in a Hollywood movie, the amount of sound design that goes into that is something that I never even understood. But now I'm thinking about ways to do that. We've incorporated boom mics, and I'm just a little bit more cautious. If someone opens the door, let me take 5 seconds to just get that opening the door, basically. So, Chris, got the movie out, got the feedback on it. The big thing is moving on to the next project. Like I said, I'm always looking at the next project. We're always trying to get better. What has this opened doors for you, besides working with us? But we'll go into that in a second. What other doors has this kind of opened up? What connections have you made by just having this product and being able to say, hey, I made this, take a look at it. Is there any way we could work together in the future?
Yeah. Well, so the first one was the show that I mentioned earlier, Found Footage Finds. That only came about, that 5-episode season that I created only came about because I ended up talking to Louis and Monica Lavella from the founders of Found TV. And the conversation came about because I think they saw me posting in the Found Footage group. So they reached out. We ended up having a call talking about stuff. They were willing to put Ask on Found TV. They wanted to see if it was available. Because of the contract I signed, there's certain places that I'm not allowed to put it because of the distributor. So I couldn't do that. But while we were talking, I said, I'd been thinking about this idea for a documentary show that's sort of a recommendation, primer about found footage, a series. And they were like, and I don't know that they would have done this had there not been a film in the world that existed from me, so they knew that I could do it. They were like, oh, that sounds great. That sounds like something we would absolutely put on Found TV. Let us know when you've got something, and we'll put it on. So there wasn't even a submission process for me to get something on Found TV because we already had the rapport and I had this movie out in the world. So I went and shot, and did the fastest turnaround imaginable, I think, for a 5-episode TV. I started shooting it in mid-February, and it premiered on Found TV in the beginning of June. So I didn't even start making it until almost March. No, I'm sorry. I started planning in February. I shot it in March, and then edited it, and it was on TV by June on Found TV. So that's how fast that happened. The only way that something like that happens is because you've made connections, and I don't have to jump through the hoops to do anything else. So it is now currently available on Found TV, and because of another relationship with a filmmaker that I met, a friend who liked my movie and has made movies, I was having trouble getting Found Footage Finds on other platforms because it kept getting rejected on Film Hub for certain images that are in the show. And they were like, you got to take this out. You can't mention this phrase. You can't say check it out because it sounds like you're telling them to go someplace else. These are all Film Hub rules, but not necessarily rules that you'd have from the individual platforms. So I was having this problem getting over this hump. And so my friend was like, hey, just call this guy. He distributed this thing I had trouble with at Film Hub. Contacted him. I've already got it straightened out. It's going to be on later this month. Found Footage Finds is now going to be on Tubi. So all of these things that would have been massive boundaries to my content getting out in the world vanished as a result of simply having that first film that, I think people were frankly impressed with the ability that I even was able to get it done. And like they saw like sort of the willingness to like get out there and do it, and they wanted to support it in some way. And so Found TV put out the show. This other distributor helped me get it on Tubi. Obviously you and I met, and I'm sure we'll go into that in a second. I only even communicated with you because one time you posted and mentioned that you were in Florida, which I didn't even know. Reviewed one of your movies on an episode of Found Footage Finds and somehow didn't realize that it was shot like, 15 miles from my house probably. But that only happened because you saw the movie and then went and looked at the locations on IMDb, And so we ended up working together as a result of it too. And I firmly believe at least within the found footage and the low budget independent horror community, that's the way that most things happen. Like in the top tier of Hollywood, everything is connections. But I think also in the bottom tier of Hollywood, everything is connections. It's just different kinds of connections. You have to have it in order to get in at the top. And at the bottom, everybody that sees someone else who's working hard and does good work and wants to support them. And so it becomes like a whisper network of helpers, essentially. And that's kind of what has happened. And also just wanting to work together because we like each other's work. So that's been a huge boon to me. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll go into basically how I found Chris, which is kind of a cool story. But basically I watch only indie movies. I watch like the big movies, like I watch Weapons and like all the big stuff that comes out, but my true love is indie movies. So while I'm working each day, I have Tubi on, or I'll go through the list of Amazon Prime movies and stuff that just came out, and I watch everything. I've watched every single independent movie I think that's come out this year. I just constantly, for hours and hours a day, while I'm working, I will have another movie on there. And Ask came up, and I watched it, and I was like, this is really good. Like, this is kind of cool. And then I saw you were posting in the groups. And for every independent movie I watch, I always go on IMDb, and I always look at who the distribution company is. Because if they're putting a movie out there that's doing well, and it's similar to stuff that we do, I put their contact information in an Excel spreadsheet. And then whenever I have a screener, I'll introduce myself and say, hey, this is a new movie. Do you guys want to take a look? And if they come back and like, no, that's not for us, I'll be like, okay, then what is for that? Can we hop on a Zoom call? And dude, it works 95% of the time. And then I talk to them face to face, and then I'm like, hey, I got this next movie coming up. Can I send you a screener? Or what are you guys looking for in the future? Like, are you looking for dark stuff? Would you do a little bit lighter stuff like Chad Gets the Axe? What are you guys looking for? And they'll tell you. And then you go make those movies. It's like magic, basically. But I saw that Chris, it was shot in Orlando, Florida, and I live downtown Orlando. I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. And I think I messaged you, or I like replied to one of your comments on there. I was like, good to see supporting Orlando filmmakers or something like that. And then he reached out on Facebook, and we started a conversation. And this is right when I was shooting Devil's Hostage. So I was like swamped at that time. And while we were doing Devil's Hostage, the craziest thing, when you're on set, the best ideas come to you because it's like lack of sleep, the caffeination, just being in this crazy creative environment for like 12 days. I was like, man, I wonder if we could put him as, the main documentary character for this mockumentary that we're doing. Because I didn't have a character, and I was like, it really needs to be someone that can speak and have a presence to them. And it's like Ask. And so in my head, the seed got planted, and I started just seeing it. I showed like our cast and crew. I'm like, what do you guys think about this guy? I'm like, I love this Ask movie. Like, what do you guys think? They're like, I think he's really good. And so then I think I got off set, and I was like, hey, you want to do this? I don't really have a script. Like, I wrote the script in like 2 weeks. But that connection never would have been there if you didn't make that movie. It just would have never happened. And then Chris isn't the first person that I've worked with that has made other small little movies, shorts or something, that I've really, really liked, and I've brought them to work on our movies. But it just was the right place at the right time and the right person for the role. And he worked with us. A month later, we shot the movie, and I couldn't have had a better person for that role. I mean, you absolutely crushed it, and I'm so happy. This movie was basically so much fun for me to make because it was basically, we had a very limited amount of time, and I had the option of just not doing it. Nothing was like lining up. The crew that Dylan Tegan, who are my crew, basically can only work for 1 week. In early August, we had just gone off this crazy shoot, and I'm just going to go for it. And I was like, Chris, can you come in and do it? And you're like, yeah. And we were like, all right, we're going to try and get this movie done. and it just worked out. It worked out phenomenally, and I'm so happy with it. But that never would have happened if you never made Ask. I don't think, even if you're just on the Facebook group or just doing found footage finds, I never would have reached out to you, even if you were in Orlando. So that's a real life example of this stuff and the connections that you make. So Chris, let's wrap up here. Is there anything else that you've learned in this process? If you had to give advice to either found footage filmmakers or horror filmmakers that are starting their most independent feature, they're low budget, they only have their iPhone, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, well, I think there are two things that I can tell you that are the most important pieces of advice. The things that helped me, luckily, they were ones that I decided on before I made my movie, so I got to take advantage of them. The first one is, whatever the first movie is that you're making, it's got to be something you really care about. Like, don't try to make something that you hope is going to break through, that you hope is going to be a big thing. It might be and it might not be, but that can't be the reason that you make your first movie. Your first movie has to be the place where you learn, the place where you make mistakes, the place where you have all the problems you're going to run into as a first-time filmmaker. So the thing that you're making, you really have to care about in order to get over all of those humps, right? In order to get to the end of the line. You know how many people have started and not finished a movie because of that? They started shooting something, they got one scene done, and they were like, oh, this is harder than I thought, or I don't think it's going to do that well, or whatever, and they gave up. In order to not do that, it needs to be a thing you're passionate about. So the message of Ask, what it is I wanted to say with Ask, was very important to me. The idea of this generation that we've created of people who think that getting easy success is good for them as opposed to being very bad for them. I think that was an important message. So I wanted to tell that story. So that's the first one. Be passionate about whatever it is, but make it something you really want. And the second is, it's something that I learned from Robert Rodriguez and Rebel Without a Crew, but I think I took it to a whole other level with the found footage movie, which is reverse engineer from all the stuff you have first. Figure out how to use what you have. Most people make the mistake of coming up with an idea and then trying to figure out how to execute it. You need to go the other way around. Instead of saying, all right, well, I wrote this movie and it takes place, so there's a guy who drives an 18-wheeler, so I got to find an 18-wheeler. That's bad because you're now already spending money you don't have. Go the other way around. Start to think, what are things I have access to for free? Well, my brother-in-law is a security guard, so he has one of those weird little golf carts that he drives around. I can use that for free in evenings. My friend works guarding a swimming pool, so I can shoot there at night, right? Reverse engineer to figure out what are all the things that you have access to that are weird or interesting, talents that you have, stuff in your house or a friend's house that would be a cool prop. Make a list, make a database of all that crap, and then basically start working. You're never going to be able to use all of it, but you'll be able to use a bunch of it. And then what will happen is it'll start to help coalesce into an idea that can use all of these things. And then what's powerful about that is that it now looks intentional. It looks like you wrote a story, and like mine, you wrote a story where you got brand new teeth, and then you had a pillow with your face on it, and then you had a bat that was monogrammed with your name. Like, where did all these props come from? You must have spent a bunch of money on it. No, this was crap around my house. I just reverse engineered and figured out how to write it into the story so it seemed like it was intentional. That is going to be the most powerful tool that you have at your disposal as a creative, which is the ability to fool an audience into thinking that stuff that you had is stuff that you created, stuff that you conceptualized. I just had things around and I figured out how to combine them into something that looked like more than it was. And that's the biggest piece of advice I could give to someone for making an inexpensive movie. Find an idea you're passionate about and then reverse engineer everything you have to figure out how to put that stuff into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fantastic points. And my closing statement would be just make it. Make it and upload it. I think actually make it is not enough. If you want to ask actors about all the movies and shorts and stuff that they've made that they're hoping for their demo reel and it never gets released, quote unquote, I call it the void. There's a lot of movies, and I'd probably wager 60 to 7% of indie films never get released because the director, the producers, they get all this footage and they say it's just not good enough or they're missing stuff and they just give up. Making a film is the hardest art form there is. There's so many people involved in this process. There's so much stuff going on. It is extremely, extremely difficult. But if you want to get started, it is just like anything else. You get better as you do it. You can go back and look at our movies that are on YouTube right now. I put all our old stuff up there so you can see how we've gone from that to what we're doing now. It's a huge step up. You have to make it with what you got and you have to upload it. Even if it's on YouTube, just get it up there. People will watch it. You can get feedback and you can get better. the odds of you making your first feature film and it blowing up is really, really rare. And the ones like they used to happen in the 90s and 80s and 2000s, the first time big hit director, Steven Spielberg, all this stuff, they had teams of producers and people who knew how to do this. They had professional cameramen, all this stuff. Unless you have a huge budget and you're working for A24, it is just not going to happen. And I hope it does. I really do. I'm really rooting for you guys. I'm just saying the model has shifted. You're much better at making something, learning from it, and then doing it again and getting better. So once again, thank you guys. Appreciate you for watching. I think Chris has dropped an absolute ton of knowledge. And this isn't theory. This isn't film school. This is stuff that you can go watch his movie and see how he did it. And it's out there. And he has jump-started an awesome career. Fantastic actor working with us. I'm going to keep all his links in the description if you want to check out his stuff. Keep up with him, found footage finds, and ask where his movies, his products. He's probably got more stuff coming up. Chris, anything else you want to say before we hop off?
No, I agree with you. Go out and make it, man. Like you can't possibly make a movie for much less than I did. So why not give it a try? You know what I mean? Like $250 sounds like a lot of money for someone who's trying to pay bills. But also, this doesn't cost anything. This is my phone. You could just literally turn it on right now and make something. So why not do it, you know?
All right, guys. Good night. Go make your movie. Put it on there. I will watch it. I watch everything. I will give you feedback if you want it. But that's the first step. Thank you, guys, and we will see you later. Bye.